All right, are we in this thing? Oh yeah. All right. I might actually have to go heat my coffee up a little bit. That's it's getting kind of cold already. All right, my bad, guys. My bad. Honestly, I know I'm. I swear I just got a message. I don't know. Yeah. Yo, good morning. And what it do? Why? Yo, I hate this fucking laptop. I swear I need a mouse. I hate this fucking touchpad because my shit is not. This shit don't work every. What the fuck? So this is what I'm working on next. I'm gonna start mixing some blues so I can go over the sky. As always, I'm gonna work my way through the background first and then come to the foreground and work on the portrait. Listening to these original beats real quick. up. I'm about to do a little Instagram live at the same time, real quick. And I really want to show this last piece I just finished up close on Instagram. Let people check it out. Because I finished it yesterday, and I already had the pictures and everything ready yesterday. I forgot to post it last night before I went to bed, so I just posted pictures this morning, but like already like 20, 30 people already on that shit. Yo, good morning. What's up, guys? Yo. The last day of the year, yo. It's crazy. The last day of the year. What? We made it all the way through. I'd like to thank myself. I'd like to thank everyone else. And congratulations on making it another solar cycle. You know what I'm saying? This is a good thing. I hope we learned a lot this year. Shit been really crazy. Like, if y'all know me, y'all follow my stuff, man. Y'all know like I am a conspiracy theorist and not on some wacky stuff, but like a lot of shit be weird. You know what I'm saying? And when this whole COVID thing hit a couple years ago, and they started telling us like 15 weeks or whatever, my mind was already on something else. Yo, I was like, this shit is gonna last for a long time, for years. I already predicted that shit, and it has lasted for years. But at the same time, like, we had to learn how to maneuver through this thing, and now we do all kind of Zooms and homeschooling and everything else, and you know, like, people had to like kind of restructure their lives to survive within this new type of atmosphere that we live in. But at the same time, like, this year has been a good year for me, despite, you know, all the social issues and all the global health issues and personal issues and everything else. Like, this year was a good year for me, and I'm grateful for all of my accomplishments. I feel like I have progressed a little bit this year, gained a little bit more understanding about myself, about the people I love. I feel like I accomplished some goals that I set, some goals that I've had for a while, and I accomplished some goals this year. I one of my goals was to have my art take me somewhere, and this year, like, my art took me to 3 different places that I probably would have never went without my art. You know, I went to Kansas City, Missouri. I went to California. I went to a little town in Tennessee, just because that's where my art took me. And so my art allowed me to see some places I probably would have never thought to check out. And I'm really appreciative for that. Also, I had my first solo museum exhibit. And it's not like a national museum or a state museum. It's a local museum, but it is still like a legit museum. Like, you know, the building is over 100 years old, and it's been a museum from day one. It's been around for a long time, well established, well known, and it's a beautiful building. It's a beautiful place, and yeah, they allowed me to have an art exhibit there. So that was another one of my goals, and I was able to accomplish that this year. So I really feel like this year was okay. You know what I'm saying? It was an okay year. I got some shit done, and so I hope everybody else were able to accomplish some goals they set this year, and just be able to grow and progress in your personal life, in your career, and everything else. And you know, and now tomorrow let's do it one more time. You know what I'm saying? Just gonna do that shit one more time, and in 2023, you're gonna, you know, just keep it moving. So once again, I appreciate everybody just coming in, checking out the streams on the last day of the year. You know what I'm saying? Art and education. We chilling in the studio, listening to some original beats that I made on GarageBand. Because I do it all. You know what I'm saying? I do it all. I paint. I make beats, rap, do all kind of stuff. But I did want to give you guys oh, everybody left Instagram just now. I was gonna give Instagram a close up of the piece I just finished, but there's no one there. If anybody does pop in, we'll go over to the canvas. So yeah, what I want to do is I would need the iPad for that. I'm listening to the beats on the iPad. I'm trying to think because I really like this beat. I got stuff for a minute. Like, that's a really good beat, man. I really like that. All right. Well, a few people did come into the Instagram live for a second. Nobody really stayed in there. It's all good. Yeah. All right. Nobody's in the YouTube right now. All right. All right. So what I want to do, I want to turn the Bluetooth off on turn that off and pull up the pictures from here. See, now I think I should have went with like probably should have did an ultramarine blue to start with, and then put the cobalt blue. I mean the cerulean blue on top of the ultramarine. Yeah. All right. Still, so what? I'm gonna use a lot of white, and I guess still just a little bit of a fucking cerulean now. Well, I don't know. I can probably maybe if I do more of a wash, I could add a little bit of that French ultramarine in there. All right, so I'm gonna get some cerulean blue and some French ultramarine and a bunch of white. And I think that'll be the sky. What did I just say? Oh, French ultramarine. I don't know if that's it. When I look at other people's studios, like what's this? People be having like way neater ways of holding their paint. You know what? I guess I'm almost certain this has to be it then. This is Old Holland, but I'm almost sure that's like my French ultramarine. I need to get a gambling version of it if I don't have it. Recently that it is uncouthful and it is horrible. It is disrespectful to ask
the vaccination status of somebody who suddenly died. And I'm kind of sorry, but fuck you. You needed to know mine to get into fucking Wendy's, bro. Like, I couldn't go into a hospital with my own child. Fuck you. Well, I just read. I need you to type these up. You gonna finish the fence?
Yo, this dude is crazy. The videos you've been making. All right, so what I need to do is
Our next speaker will be J. Golden Barton. Mr. Barton was a friend and travel companion of Dr. Paul Chessman of Brigham Young University before Dr. Chessman's passing. Your travels took them far and wide in researching and authenticating finds around the world pertaining to ancient history. To even talk about a portion of the things Mr. Barton has been involved with would necessitate its own symposium. One of the places they did get to travel was in South America to visit with the Father Crespi in South America. Mr. Barton will be talking with us about the Father Crespi collection today.
motherfucking setup.
Thank you.
Like my little rig I got, right? The whole two fucking
Ladies and
drums.
gentlemen, academics, scholars, students, explorers, adventurous, and fellow travelers. I appreciate this opportunity to discuss the
studio
Father
is a mess.
Crespi collection of Cuenca,
But
Ecuador.
I know how to work
The
it.
late
Though.
Dr.
That's the thing.
Paul R. Chessman, former director of Book of Mormon Studies at Brigham Young University,
received a most unusual assignment, which he faithfully performed for many years during the 60s, 70s, and 80s of the past.
This sounds like it's going to be boring. But I was watching another person talk about like some just ancient discoveries, that some artifacts that just don't make sense. It's just like, what the fuck is this shit? Where did this shit come from? And then they said they were talking about this one dude, Father Crespi, and he had this weird collection of all these fucking ancient artifacts that seem like super fucking old, with like some kind of goddamn language that don't nobody know what the fuck that shit is. And then there's this one picture of him holding this fucking crown, but the crown was like hella fucking big, yo. But it looks like a fucking king's crown, but that shit just super fucking big. And it's like, who the fuck head could fit that shit? And then he had some other big ass, yo. And I was like, so I was just trying to find like more stuff on this Father Crespi. And so this was like the first documentary that came up. But this shit seemed old. And the guy introducing this shit already seems like boring as shit. Like, damn.
Century. The first presidency of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints received from time to time letters, manuscripts, telephone calls from various sources suggesting information as to the location of ancient records, artifacts, gold plates, etc., etc. The whole was turned over to Dr. Chessman to sift the wheat from the chaff. Apostle Mark E. Peterson was the liaison with church headquarters. On March the 5th, 1974, I was instructed by Dr. Chessman to pick up Elder Peter. Dr. Chessman had arranged us to meet the plates of Sassalis Sino. Past, as noted in the Book of Mormon, Ether 9.
So boring.
We have in the past covered the fascinating legends and indeed recovered artifacts that have been found over the years within the Ecuadorian cave system, known locally as Cueva de los Tallos. The legends of the cave nearly all surround hidden treasures of lost, ancient, and giant civilizations, including the deposit of an ancient yet inexplicable library room made entirely from a curious metallic formula. With caves with an intrigue strong enough to even attract the attention of the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong, one began to wonder whether these legends be true. And when you bring Father Crespi's collection into the fold, the flurry of interest surrounding these legends, and indeed the artificial nature of some of the portions of the cave itself, all become easily explainable via such motives of discovery. Father Crespi, as the title would suggest, was a religious man, and one who was highly philanthropic, and also incredibly interested in the artifacts of antiquity. And fortunately for him and us, the location in which he lived was steeped in lost ancient artifacts, all just waiting to be recovered. Father Crespi was a man of modest wealth, and in return for curious artifacts, often found within the Taos cave, even reported to have given food in return for clear forgeries offered by hungry individuals, although he would offer more and often money, respective of the artifact's clearly historical value. This allowed Father Crespi to gather a literal hoard of authentic ancient artifacts, many clearly from this long claim to exist metallic library, his collection full of metallic plates of unknown writings and other fascinating metallic artifacts. The reason for our revisiting of these caves, and indeed the fascinating character that was Father Crespi, is our recent perusing of new information released on the cave, deliberately ignoring all aforementioned facts, including the artificial nature of some of the portions of the cave itself, in particular at entrances, as if reinforced with enormous ancient lintels. Unfortunately, all that remains of Father Crespi's collection that can be confirmed as 100% his and authentic now only exist within the photos taken of him with his collection prior to his death, whereas the hoard of artifacts was ransacked and many replaced with poor quality forgeries. Thus, it is a mystery, and we believe conspiracy to conceal a lost history, which we find incredibly frustrating.
This holiday season, when you rent an EV from Hertz, you can enjoy all the traditions with none of the emissions. Hertz, let's go. Ho, ho, ho. Let's go.
Save big during the winter clearance event at Raymore and Flanagan. Get up to 40% off floor samples, up to 33% off clearance and special sale items, and discounts on furniture and mattresses throughout the store. Shop now and save while supplies last. Only at Raymore and Flanagan.
So we're here in Cuenca, Ecuador, with April and John or Yanis from ancient-origins.net. I'm also here with Jim Vieira, and we're researching Father Crespi and his treasure. Behind me, you can see the statue of Father Crespi, who was a monk who was sent over by the Vatican to kind of bring Christianity to the local tribes here. But what happened? He apparently got gifted hundreds, if not thousands, of artifacts of gold, copper, and this so-called metal library, as well as all these Assyrian, Babylonian, and Sumerian pieces. The whole museum got burnt down. There's nothing left, but we're here and we're just checking out. We may be able to see some of these artifacts today. So Jim's been researching this because they may have come from Taos Cave, which is not too far from here. It's a few hours away. So what's your take on it, Jim?
Well, I talked to Eileen Hall, the daughter of Stanley Hall, who led an expedition in 1976 to the Taos Cave system. And Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, was involved, and hundreds of explorers. I believe they only found some pottery and other artifacts in the skeleton from 1500 BC. But the cave system is enormous. And if you watch Stanley Hall's video, when he meets with Father Crespi, there's some amazing looking Babylonian, Sumerian artifacts in sheets of metal. And it's a real question, are they legitimate or not? And we're trying to see if we could find any of the remnants of his collection. So it's a really intriguing story. Well, Crespi himself didn't explore the caves. No, yeah, he wasn't.
According to the story, he was doing a lot of help to the indigenous people,
Yeah.
orphans of the indigenous, and so they supposedly gifted him these artifacts, but whether that's the reality of the situation or not is another question.
I find it odd that there's not a lot left, even if they were hoaxed. You know, like, why did they all seem to disappear? Yeah, it was
Even about fire, the
I see it.
museum fire. Yeah, so most of the artifacts were held in the museum, and then it mysteriously went up in flames. And so a lot of it was destroyed, but then apparently the rest of it either went to the central bank, which one account is saying that whatever survived went to the central bank. But, you know, we're hoping some of them might be here in the monastery that he started.
Yeah, I talked to Eileen, Stan Hall's daughter, and she had talked about this place, and there theoretically being some artifacts left. Yeah, it must. So you've made friends with the Schwab people. You've been into the cave system. Do you think that it's another system that might be the one that's where these artifacts came from? Do you think it's Taos, like the further reaches, because it's such a massive system? You think that might be the case?
Yeah, I mean, if the Schwab people said that they were retrieving gold from the caves,
Yeah.
I mean, there must be somewhere else, too. Not only these specific caves that they get gold.
I think the situation of the fire is really interesting as
Yeah.
well, because obviously the artifacts have a lot of value, you know, being made of gold. So for them to have been destroyed, if it was intentional, means there was something about these artifacts that somebody didn't like. Perhaps they revealed information about an older civilization that conflicted with the conventional understanding of things. Who knows? Maybe it was accidental, but it is quite mysterious that this museum suddenly went up in flames and everything was lost, or a lot was lost.
That's a pretty consistent theme. When something's controversial and the lad gets lit up pretty quickly.
Accidents only happen to controversial artifacts.
But what about the ones that were said to be found by Stan Hall and his group, and they got helicoptered out? You tell us.
No, the Schwab people said that.
But were they the artifacts or just gold?
They didn't know, but the U.S. mission, the U.S. British, I think it was, that they, with Armstrong, that they did the first research in the caves. The Schwab people said that they came out with those helicopters were retrieving things from the caves. Now, what they were? But according to them, they didn't find anything.
I was going to say, that's it. Stan, I talked to Eileen, his daughter. He seems like a stand-up guy, and she's really, cast in the same mold. And I don't think Stanley Hall would have caught anything kind of something else might happen. I don't think Stan Hall would ever be involved in something like that. Yeah. But it is such a fascinating story. Really is. Yeah.
So we're just outside the front of Father Crespi's church, and behind me here are what look like some of the metal plates that are actually found or given to Father Crespi. He was known to have this huge selection of these very large, like a metal library, it was called, even from Atlantis, some people said. But these look exactly like them. So perhaps they built them into the church, or like recarved them. And like you can see it here, it's completely strange. We're going to go inside the church now and see if we can get access in the basement to some of the actual artifacts that Father Crespi had in his collection. So we made our way into the actual building, which is like the grounds where the monastery was. There's also a school here, a medical hospital. This is all the stuff that Crespi founded himself. He was quite a missionary, did some good work apparently. So we're going to just see what we can find here. Who knows? We may find nothing, but it's worth trying.
Está cerrado porque no sé qué es el armonio que tocaba, que era de la iglesia que porque está viejo y está desadaptada. No hay más nada.
So he's saying that
I'm mistaken with that.
since the band passed, and the only thing that there is left here is
Armonio.
harmonium.
It's Father Crespi right here.
So in the university in Cuenca, behind me, some of the artifacts that Father Crespi collected. These were protected, and so the bank was not allowed to take them. But we're in contact with the director of the look at. You can just see some examples here that are still here at the university. He says.
Free shipping and free returns every day. Enjoy the best of fall at Saks.com.
The artifacts that they say they're from Mesopotamia, Egypt. He says that, well, he believes that people brought fake artifacts to show Father Crespi and to make him believe that, those were genuine Ecuadorian artifacts of extraterrestrials. He says, no, that's not true.
What was Crespi's opinion?
Crespi denied all those things.
He knew they were fake.
So he said, yeah, the things that are with Mesopotamian science and all that.
Yeah.
But he says the main goal of Father Crespi's main idea was just to focus on poor people, just helping the poor people out.
Did he believe that any of the artifacts, like the genuine artifacts, came from the Taos Caves, or is that like a made-up story by Von Däniken?
El padre Crespi, como decía el padre rector, el padre recogía cosas. He says all the artifacts found were collected by Father Crespi, and some people came to him and gave him artifacts. So this led to some people taking advantage of Father Crespi and bringing him fake artifacts that weren't even ancient. They were just made up artifacts, and he would buy them, but just to help them out. He knew they were fake. He was just taking them.
I heard that. Yeah, the story seems to have been spun in a way where Carlos Crespi was perceived as believing that a lot of these artifacts that were bizarre were legitimate and from somewhere else, or a lost library. Kind of try to untangle that story to see if there's any legitimacy to it. My friend here from the university doesn't think there's any validity to the story. Hopefully we'll get to look at some of the artifacts at the bank, the central bank. But I'm dubious right now. I'd have to see something that's pretty, not so, how do I express it? Something that's legitimate and from another place, from another country with a different language. I haven't seen it yet. So we'll see.
So we're now outside the museum of Pumapungu. Next door is the central bank of Cuenca. This is where a lot of Father Crespi's artifacts are kept. So we're going to go and take a look in there and hopefully get access to the private collection of the bank, which should include some of these incredible artifacts. So I'm in the basement of the museum here in Cuenca. And all this art you can see behind me, all this religious art and these pieces are all from Father Crespi. 60% at least, possibly 90%. So these aren't the pieces we're looking for, but it's just the start of our little exploration here. Elongated skulls. So some elongated skulls are on display here. Very interesting.
Tanto por ciento, no sabría decirlo. Las piezas son adquiridas. En su total habla que de 5,000.
We're inside the Ecuador Banco Museum, and there's an elongated skull here. Now, they have no idea where it came from, what era it was from, any of its location or anything, but they're on display here. So we're going to go now into the archive room, and hopefully we'll see some very, very interesting pieces.
Yes, the mass older and the mass young is the colony of time in this place. Yeah, and it's close. I have this part all the archaeology is about the excavation in this place, in this side of Pumapungo. Yeah. All
This as well.
no, this song is like Crespi Collections.
Oh.
Yes. This,
From Father Crespi.
Yeah.
Under Father Crespi.
Oh my God! Look at that.
sí, but
And this as well.
sí,
Crespi.
yes, these two.
Wow. Here we have the double spirals. This is what you get all over the world. So you see the stone just behind me here, and the skull at the end of the skeleton. But this stone with all these spirals on is from the Crespi collection. This is incredible because it's got spiral carvings on, similar to what we find in Peru and Bolivia, Tiwanaku, but also Malta, Britain, New Zealand, everywhere. So in fact, we've got a piece here from the Crespi collection, which has got like a megalith with petroglyphs, which is just incredible. It's got a powerful jewel, this one. Yeah, this sort of tiling as well.
It's interesting. You know this one?
So this skull was actually found at Pumapungo itself, one of the first ones here, with clear signs of major cranial deformation. So this is quite unique. This isn't on display in the main museum, this is in the basement. So 60% of these pieces, remember, are from Father Crespi's collection. Many of them are from other sites, such as Pumapungo and others around the country. It looks very much like an archaic skull. It not look like a modern type skull.
Tuve que inventariarlo,
Lo trajimos.
restaurarlo, porque debido a la cantidad de posiblemente esto es para fermentar chicha y no va a ser muy grato. Entonces por eso que las civilizaciones tratan de preservar la mayor cantidad de tiempo de sus vasijas que han sido heredadas. Chicha.
Fermented better on these stones. They try to preserve them, and this is why they use animal skin. Leather, try to keep them in place.
As far as ellas.
So these chairs are mainly for people of high power, and when they gather around, you know, all the high-powered people, but the one that was on top of everybody else would sit on these chairs.
What kind of time era are these from?
¿De qué temporada serían estos? ¿De qué año?
Este es posiblemente periodo de integración, más o menos. Está entre el 1000, 1200. O sea, ha habido más tempranos, pero estimo que es por esos periodos. Son las famosas sillas manteñas, ¿no?
1200s.
480.
Various artifacts here. 60% of this collection is from Father Crespi. I haven't seen any of the metal library of Atlantis just yet, but we will soon. These are like tools for cranial deformation, like we see in Peru and Bolivia. Some more artifacts here.
This is from
So this is from Pumapungo here. Some of the stonework. These are like nicely cut pieces, some of these. Then we have this, and one of the idols. Also a goddess figurine. So these are like dowsing pendulums.
Okay.
See, these are elongation. These representations of them.
meeting.
We're on this incredible tour of a troll-themed Norwegian town, but we get into a dumb argument. Our guide saves the day, whispering from behind a troll statue.
Don't fight. You're missing the view. One app, over 300,000 experiences you'll remember. Do more with Viator.
Strange carvings. Just behind me here, this is the sign. UFO, aliens. This must be the right collection.
Studied a lot about this. You even wrote a thesis for the university about this.
For more 5 years, I studied about the transfer, all about books or everything. And I made 2 years of workshop in the Shuar and all days, the places in about
So we've seen some artifacts from the Crespi collection, the stonework, and the elongated skulls. Although the people here think all the metal artifacts are fake, I'm going to take a look at some. Yes, we've just been escorted out of the museum, and now we're being led to another building in the whole precinct of Pumapunku, the bank and the museums here. And this is where the supposed artifacts made of metal from Crispi's collection are kept. Generally believed to be fakes by all the archaeologists. They weren't really thought of as anything important or valuable. But as an investigator, I want to check this out, just see it for myself. I'll just get some photos, analyze it, look at the symbols, see what we come up with. Oh my God. Here we have the metal pieces of Crispi's collection. Oh yeah. So behind me here, you can see many of the pieces of metal from Father Crispi's collection. Thought to be fake by many, but we've actually made it. We've actually found the lost metal library of Father Crespi. Some people say it's the lost metal library of Atlantis. So I'm going to film as much of this as possible so you can see what was in his collection when it was on display 30 or 40 years ago. See the headpiece of this sword here. Where's the big guitar? Where's the crown? Where's the big metal crown? Oh, it's not alive.
So the locals, yeah, there's a lot of the metal ones are fake. They look like somebody's got us. Like, you show the ones in the picture. Browns looking.
So you can see the metal pieces here just piled into a corner. They're not organised, they're just assumed to be fake. But these are these priceless artifacts. So we're going to get as much of this as we can on film just to see if we can archive this effectively. But so let's take a look.
Here, you move them like this. Take this process.
This is crazy.
You see if this happens when you work with institutions.
Yeah, the last one.
Show me the legit. See more, get more. Hold it up to the camera.
See how it looks like.
Yeah, I don't know about that.
Every moment in life is a bet. Like betting your favorite jersey won't shrink in the dryer. But let
Spell that Rafael. And Roman is just spelled like Roman. Roman, 32-year-old. Yeah, I would echo everything that ADA Pescator said. The charges in a case of this type could include involuntary manslaughter, possibly murder, endangering the welfare of a child. It could also, depending on the evidence, include illegal possession of a gun, possibly 6105, which is a felon in possession of a gun. If there was an effort to destroy or secrete evidence that potentially could lead to other things in the nature of obstructing the administration of justice, charges relating to destruction of evidence, things of that sort. But we are not saying those will be charges in this case. We, as always, we want to make sure there's a thorough, careful investigation and we bring the right charges. Are there other questions?
Just lastly, obviously, not all of them are jacking each other around the city, so it's probably a focus group. Can you talk about if you can figure out whether this is a ring, whether this is a focused area of people, that it's 20 people, 15 people? Is there a realization of that yet, that it's just one group basically committing all of these, or a couple of groups committing all of these carjackings?
I don't think anyone here is going to take the position it's just one group, but what we certainly have learned from the Akubu case and information around the country is it doesn't take a whole lot of people to do a lot of carjackings. And often the connections that are needed in order to do shipping out of Baltimore, out of Savannah, Georgia, connections with container companies, container hauling companies, shipping companies, overseas connections, buyers providing lists of cars they're seeking. Often those connections are not going to be one-offs. Those connections are going to exist for people who have a whole network that they're working with. But it is our hope that we will be able to catch organizations, groups of people who work together. Yes.
En español, para Telemundo 62. ¿Podría, por favor, empezar explicando en español la importancia de la creación de este grupo de investigaciones, unidad de carjackings, para la resolución de los homicidios en Filadelfia?
Okay. Estamos aquí anunciando un grupo nuevo en esta oficina para proseguir e investigar casos de robo de carro, de carjacking, de robo de automóviles, porque esos automóviles robados tienen tanto que ver con disparos y con la violencia de armas que tenemos en la ciudad. Y estamos tratando de mejorar la investigación y lo que pasa en corte con estos casos.
Muy bien. También podría decirme si están contemplando realizar una alianza con los estados vecinos para poder ampliar los resultados de las investigaciones. Es decir, Delaware y New Jersey son estados que tenemos prácticamente casi como condados, entonces
grupo va a trabajar mucho con grupos federales y también con otros fiscales, otras personas en otros sitios. Montgomery County, Chester County, New Jersey, cualquier sitio donde puedan robar automóviles o llevar los automóviles que roban aquí, intentamos trabajar juntos con ellos.
Okay, Spanish lady. You ain't got all you can't hold the goddamn float for the whole thing. Jesus Christ.
I'm Aubrey. I'm going to send you because I have a cancerous tumor. These kids.
That they have. We're not running a deli here. We're trying to run a top flight prosecutor's office. So these resources are absolutely crucial, absolutely essential. And I would remind every taxpayer, because I'm one too, that we are in a city where the police budget is close to $1 billion, and the funding of this office is about 50 million bucks. We're talking that the funding here is about 5% of what happens in the police department. It's really important that we fund everything that is so close to gun violence and so close to carjackings. And it's really important in this instance that we were able to get this amount of money to support this.
So salaries and retention.
It's a part of it. It's also hiring people from the outside, having additional investigative capacity, having additional resources, things like, some of our work is going to be done by social media analysts. Well, that's a big deal. When you have people who know how to look around social media to find evidence that connects to other evidence, it can make all the difference. The notion that we get a case in a box that's perfect is not fair to us, and it's also not fair to investigators on the outside. Sometimes these cases have to be investigated intensively for months and months. Sometimes we're able to get someone who's arrested to cooperate with us and give us information on 50 more carjackings. But all of that takes human power, and it takes extra time, and it takes moderate caseloads, and it means we got to hang on to our talent. So all that works together.
And specifically on juveniles, what is the approach now, specifically in this unit in terms of getting a handle on juveniles who are part of this and committing these crimes?
So, obviously the intent of the juvenile system is a little bit different. Its specific legal purpose is, where possible, to rehabilitate people, not just to punish, but to rehabilitate people. Sometimes you can do that. Sometimes you really can't. You find yourself in a situation where an older juvenile who's been involved in a lot of criminal activity has to be prosecuted in adult court. Well, it requires careful sifting and careful analysis to figure out which juveniles need the hammer and which juveniles can be turned in a different direction. Both of those things make us safer if we do it right. So that will be a primary focus. But understand, this office has been doing carjacking cases for a long time, and we've been doing them well. We just want to do them a whole lot better. I'm blessed at having Barack Obama's former chief of juvenile justice for the United States of America, Bob Listenby, in this office as a first assistant. Where'd he go? See, he's not running. He's right here. I'm blessed that he's in this office, and he has always taken, throughout his entire career, a very, very close interest in juvenile work. It really is his life's work. So we have a tremendous resource with Bob, and we have a tremendous resource with Yasmin Finnegan, who has been a mainstay trying the most serious cases in our juvenile unit for a long time. We got the right team here. But it's, I think it's fair to say that when you are going after adults, rehabilitation is always important because sometimes that is how you make the public the most safe. But certain cases require a hammer. And adults who are engaging in carjacking and terrifying the community and tearing apart society are looking at a hammer. And when you're going after juveniles, there is a place for a hammer, and then there is a place for knowing the difference and knowing when we're all safer if we work more on the rehabilitation end of that. And I believe we have the right personnel to make those kinds of important decisions.
So someone in the route for go to position.
I'm sorry?
I said I'm in the route for go to position today. Just wanted to circle back around the homicide rate.
Yeah.
You said 7% is good, but it's still a lot of people.
Well, there's no question that if my math is right, as of today, right now, we're looking at 41 people alive who on this day last year weren't. And as the council member said, that makes a difference. It makes a difference to their families. It makes a difference to their communities that blood was not on the ground in that particular community. But I'm not going to stand up here and celebrate there being more than 500 homicides in the city of Philadelphia this year. We have seen a tremendous 2-year spike in gun violence, clearly connected to the pandemic all over the country, also in Philadelphia. We need to do everything we can. I'd love to see a 70% reduction in homicides next year. I think everybody who's involved with this work would like to see a 100% reduction. That's what we hope for. This year we have 7%. And the most that I can really say is that's 41 lives that were lost last year, not lost this year. But we need to do better, and we need to build from here. And I hope we can.
It's something that I think Tom may have addressed. I'm sorry, I wasn't following all of it. I did listen to the court hearing this morning with your attorneys in the impeachment process, and there was at one point a point was made that impeachment itself, there is a harm in it because it impedes your ability to effectively do your job. What has the impact of this impeachment process been on your ability to do your job?
Well, as you see, we're here working as hard as we can today, like we do pretty much every day. I'm not going to comment on what's going on. It's in.
How did this happen? What could we have done differently? And I just suggest to you that is the mindset of every single person who's the victim of a crime, of every single person who's the victim of a fraud. So As we stand here today watching this slow George Santos train wreck take place, we need to stand together because we do not want to be presented by a clown in Albany. We do not want to be represented by, excuse me. Thank you. We not only don't want to be represented by any clown in local government, in state government, but especially not in our nation's capital. I thank each and every one of you for being here today to stand together, because what we've been through is the same as victims of a Ponzi scheme. And the big difference is that in a Ponzi scheme, at least the first few people to invest who want their money back get some money back. We, the citizens of the 3rd Congressional District, are simply left holding the bag. We are simply left being the laughingstock of the United States of America and the international community. So with that in mind, I want to introduce several people to speak with you today. And the first is a youth activist, a wonderful young man, Greg Lung. Greg.
Thank you, Mr. Assemblyman.
Ready, Dad?
All charged up. This holiday season, Ford wants to help you shine bright with a special offer.
You can study chemistry, you can study physics, you can study geology anywhere in the universe, but this is the only place you can study biology. This is the only place to be a biologist.
Earth.
That's it.
Yeah.
So definitely something very fundamental happened here, and you cannot take biology out of the equation. If you want to understand how that vast chemistry space, how that general sequence space got narrowed down to what is available or what is used by life, you need to understand the rules of selection, and that's when evolution and biology comes into play.
The following is a conversation with Betul Kachar, an astrobiologist at University of Wisconsin, studying the essential biological attributes of life. This is the Lex Friedman podcast. To support it, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, dear friends, here's Betul Kachar. What is the phylogenetic tree or the evolutionary tree of life? And what can we learn by running it back and studying ancient gene sequences as you have?
I think phylogenetic trees could be one of the most romantic and beautiful notions that can come out of biology. It shows us a way to depict the connectedness of life and all living beings with one another. It itself is an ever-evolving notion. Biologists like visualizations. They like these graphics, these diagrams, and tree of life is one of them.
So the tree starts at a common ancestor.
It's actually the other way around. It starts from
at the end.
It starts from the branches. It starts from the tip of the branch, actually, and then the further, depending on what you collected to build the tree. So depending on the branches, depending on what's on the tip of the branch, and I will explain what I mean, the root will be determined by what is really sitting on the tip of the branch of the tree.
So we could study the leaves of the tree by looking at what we have today and then start to reverse engineer, start to move back in time to try to understand what the rest of the tree, what the roots of the tree look like.
Exactly. So the tree itself, by just taking a few steps back and looking at the entire tree itself, can give you an idea about the connectedness, the relatedness of the organisms, or whatever, again, you use to create your tree. There are different ways. But in this case, I'm imagining entire diversity of life today is sitting on the tips of the branches of this tree. And we look at biologists, look at the tree itself. We like to think of it as the topology of the tree to understand when certain organisms or their ancestry may have merged over time. And depending on the tools you use, you might use this tree to then reconstruct the ancestors as well.
And so, what are the different ways to do the reconstruction? So you can do that at the gene level, or you could do it at the higher complex biology level, right? So, in which way have you approached this fascinating problem?
We approached it in every way we can. So it's the gene, could be protein, the product of the gene, or species, or could be even groups of species. It will depend. It totally depends on what you want to do with your tree. If you want to understand certain past events, whether an organism exchanged a certain DNA with another one along the course of evolution, you can build your tree accordingly. If you rather use the tree to reconstruct or resurrect ancient DNA, which is what we do, then in our case, for instance, we do both gene, protein, and species because we want to compare the tree that we create using these different information.
Okay, well, let me ask you the ridiculous question then. So, how realistic is Jurassic Park? Can we study the genes of ancient organisms, and can we bring those ancient organisms back? So, the reason I asked that kind of ridiculous sounding question is maybe it gives us context of what we can and can't do by looking back in time.
Yeah, so dinosaurs or all these mammals in at least for us is the exciting thing already happened by the time we hit to larger organisms or to eukaryotes.
Oh, to you, the fun stuff is before we got to the mammals.
The fun stuff is what people think is boring, I think. The phase that, it's two different times in the geologic history. One is the first life, past origin of life, how did first life look like? And the second is why do we think that over certain periods of geologic time, no significant innovation happened to the degree of leaving no record behind.
So what do we not have a record of? Which part? So you said the fun stuff to you is after the origin of life, which we'll talk about. After the origin of life, there's single cell organisms, the whole thing with the photosynthesis, the whole thing with the eukaryotes and multicell organisms, and what else is the fun stuff? The whole oxygen thing, which mixes in with the origin of life. There's a bunch of different inventions. All they have to do with this primitive kind of looking organisms that we don't have a good record of.
So I will tell you the more interesting things for us. Sure. One is the origin of life, or what happened right following the emergence of life. How did the first cells look like? And then pretty much anything that we think shaped the environment and was shaped by the environment in a way that impacted the entire planet, that enabled you and I to have this conversation. We have very little understanding of the biological innovations that took place in the past of this planet. We work with a very limited set of, I don't want to even say data because they're fossil records. So let's say imprints, either that comes from the rock and the rock record itself, or what I just described, these trees that we create and whatever we can infer about the past. So we have two distinct ways that comes from geology and biology, and they each have their limitations.
Okay, so, right, so there's an interplay. The geology gives you that little bit of data, and then the biology gives you that little bit of kind of constraints in the materials you get to work with to infer how does this result in the kind of data that we're seeing? And now we can have this through the fog. We can see, we can look back hundreds of millions of years, a couple of billion years, and try to infer.
Even further, and I like that you said fog. It is pretty foggy. What we're doing, and it gets foggier and foggier the further you try to see into the past. Biology is you basically study the survivors, broadly speaking, and you're trying to put together their history based on whatever you can recover today. What makes biology fascinating also it erased its own history in a way, right? So you work with this 4 billion year product, that's genome, that's the DNA. It's great. It's a very dynamic, ever evolving chemical thing. And so you will get some information, but you're not going to get much unless you know where to look, because it is responding to the environment.
Yeah, so what we have is fascinating. What we have is the survivors, the successful organisms, even the primitive ones, even the bacteria we have today.
So bacteria is not primitive, and we
sorry to offend the bacteria.
We should be very grateful to bacteria. First of all, they are our great ancestors. I like this quote by Douglas Adams: "Humans don't like their ancestors; they rarely invite them over for dinner."
Yeah.
Right? But bacteria is in your dinner. Bacteria is in your gut. Bacteria is helping you
So we do
along the
invite
way.
them for dinner.
We invite them. Well, they get themselves invited in a way,
Yes.
and so and they're definitely older, and definitely very sophisticated, very resilient than anything else. As someone working as a bacteriologist, I feel like I need to defend them in this case because they don't get much shout out if you think about life.
So you do study bacteria. So which organisms gives you hints that are alive today that give you hints about what ancient organisms were like? Is it bacteria? Is it viruses? What do you study in the lab?
We study a variety of different bacteria depending on the questions that we ask. We engineer bacteria. So ideally, we want to work with bacteria that we can engineer. Seldom we develop the tools to engineer them. And it depends on the question that we are interested in. If we are interested in connecting the biology and geology to understand the early life and fundamental innovations across billions of years, there are really good candidates like cyanobacteria. So we use cyanobacteria very frequently in the lab. We can engineer its genome. We can perturb its function by poking its own DNA with the foreign DNA that we engineer in the lab. We work with E. coli. It's the most simple in terms of model systems goes. Organism that one can study, well-established, sort of a lab pet, that we use it a lot for cloning and for understanding basic functions of the cell, given that it's really well studied.
So, and what you do with that E. coli, you said that you inject it with foreign DNA?
We inject pretty much all the bacteria that we work with foreign DNA. We also work with diazotrophs. These are azotobacteria. They're one of the prime nitrogen fixers, nitrogen fixing bacteria.
Can you explain what that is, nitrogen fixing? Is the source of its energy?
So nitrogen is a triple bond gas that's pretty abundant in the atmosphere, but nitrogen itself cannot be directly utilized by cells given it is triple bond. It needs to be converted to ammonia that is then used for the downstream cellular functions.
And that's what counts as nitrogen fixing.
Yes, so nitrogen needs to be fixed before our cells can make use of it. And it's
no offense to nitrogen either.
Well, it's actually a very important element. It's one of the most abundant elements on our planet that is used by biology. It's in ATP. It's in chlorophyll. That relies on nitrogen. So it's a very important enzyme for a lot of cell functions.
And there's just one mechanism that evolution invented to convert it.
Fix it. So far we know there's only one nitrogen fixation pathway, as opposed to, say, carbon. You can find up to 7 or 8 different carbon-based microbes invented to fix carbon. That's not the case for nitrogen. It's a singularity across geologic time. We think it evolved around 2.7, maybe roughly 3, probably less than 3 billion years ago. And that's the only way that nature invented to fix the nitrogen in the atmosphere for the subsequent use.
Would we still have life as we know it today if we didn't invent that nitrogen fixing step?
I cannot think of it, no. It's essential to life as we know. You and I are having this conversation because life found a way to fix nitrogen.
Is that one of the tougher ones? If you put it sort of oxygen, nitrogen, carbon, but what are, in terms of being able to work with these elements, what is the hardest thing? What is the most essential for life? Just to give context.
Well, we think of this as the cocktail. you may hear.
What's in the
schnapp.
cocktail?
It's the schnapps, right? Carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, nitrogen, sulfur. So there are 5 elements that life relies on. We don't quite know whether that's the only out of many options that life necessarily needs to operate on, but that's just how it happened on our own planet. And there are many abiotic ways to fix nitrogen, and like lightning, right? Lightning can accumulate ammonia. Humans found a way about 100 years ago, I think around World War One, the Haber-Bosch process that we can abiotically convert nitrogen into ammonia. But actually, 50% of the nitrogen in our bodies comes from the human conversion of nitrogen to ammonia. It's helped. It's the fertilizer that we use, urea, comes from that process. It's in our food. So we found a way to fix our own nitrogen for ourselves.
Yeah, but that, that's way after the original invention of
Absolutely,
nitrogen.
absolutely.
And without that, we wouldn't have all the steps of evolution along the way.
Oh, absolutely. We tried to replicate in the most simplest way what nature has come up with, right? We do this by taking nitrogen, using a lot of pressure, and then generating ammonia. Life does this in a more sophisticated way, relying on one single enzyme called nitrogenase. It's the nitrogen that is used together with 8 electron donor and ATP, together with a lot of hydrogen. Life pushes this metabolism down to create fixed nitrogen. It's quite remarkable.
So the lab pet, E. coli, inject them with DNA. Those are so E. coli does nitrogen fixing in part, or is that a different one?
So some biological engineers engineered E. coli to fix nitrogen, I believe, not us. We use the nature's nitrogen fixing bug and engineer it with the nitrogen fixing metabolism that we resurrected using our computational and phylogenetic tools.
How complicated are these little organisms? What are we talking about?
Depends on how we define complication.
Okay, so I can tell that you appreciate and respect the full complexity of even the most seemingly primitive organisms, because none of them are primitive. Okay, that said, what kind of what are we talking about? How what kind of machineries do they have that you're working with when you're injecting them with DNA?
So I will start with one of the most fascinating machineries that we target, which is the translation machinery. It is a very unique subsystem of cellular life in comparison to, I would say, metabolism. And we used to, when we are thinking about cellular life, we think of cell as the basic unit or the building block. But from a key perspective, that's not the case. That one may argue that everything that happens inside the cell serves the translation and the translation machinery. There's a nice paper that called this that the entire cell is hopelessly addicted to this main informatic, computing, biological, chemical system that it is operating at the heart of the cell.
Which is the translation?
It is the translation.
What's translation from what to what? So RNA to enzymes?
Converts a linear sequence of mRNA into a later folded protein. That's when that's the core processing center for information for life. It has multiple steps. It initiates, it elongates, it terminates, and it recycles. It operates discrete bits of information. Itself is like a chemical decoding device, and that is incredibly unique for translation that I don't think you will find anywhere else in the cell that does this.
So even though it's called translation, it's really like a factory that reads the schematic and builds a three-dimensional object. It's like a printer.
I would divide it into actually even 4 more additional steps or disciplines than what would it take to study it by the way you described it. It's a chemical system. It's the compounds that make it up are chemicals. It's physical. It tracks the energy to make its job, to do its job. It's informatic. What is processed are the bits. It's computational. The discrete states that the system is placed when the information is being processed, that's itself is computational. And it's biological. It's there's variability and inheritance that come from imperfect replication even and imperfect computation. So you're
Man, that's so good. So from the biology comes the like when you mess up, the bugs are the features. That's the biology. Informatics is obvious in the RNA. That's a set of information there. The different steps along the way is actually kind of what the computer does with bits. It's doing computation. Physical, there's I guess like almost like a mechanical process to the whole thing that requires energy, and actually, it's manipulating actual physical objects. And chemical is because ultimately it's all chemistry.
Yeah, and it tracks this information. So it is almost a mini computer device inside our cells.
Yeah.
And that's the oldest computational device of life. It's likely the key operation system that had to evolve for life to emerge.
It's more interesting, or it's more complicated in interesting ways than the computers we have today. I mean, everything you said, which is really, really nice. I mean, I guess our computers have the informatic and they have the computational, but they don't have the chemical, the physical, or the biology.
Exactly. And the computers don't link information to function, right? They are not tightly coupled, nowhere close to what translation or the way translation does it. So that's the number one, I think, difference between the two. And yes, it's informatic, and we can discuss this further too.
100%. Let's please discuss this further. Which part are we discussing further? Each one of those are fascinating worlds. Each of the five.
Yeah. So we can start with the more, I guess, the ones that are more established, which is the chemical aspect of the translation machinery. It's the specific compounds make up the assembly of RNA. Chemists showed this in many different ways. We can rip apart the entire machinery. We know that at the core of it, there's an RNA that operates not only as an information system itself or information itself, but also as an enzyme. And origin of life chemists make these molecules easily now. We know we can manipulate RNA. We can make even with single pot chemistries. We can create compounds.
What's a single pot chemistry?
That's I would say when you add all the recipes that you know that will lead you to the final product.
This is what original life chemists do. Is they come up with this pot. They throw a bunch of chemicals in, and they try to. They're basically chefs of a certain kind.
I'm not sure if that's what they call it, but that's how I think of it, because it is all combined in a test tube, and you know the outcome, and it's very mathematical. Once you know the right environment and the right chemistry that needs to get into this container or this pot, you know what the outcome is. There's no luck there anymore. It's a pretty rigid, established input-output system, and it's all chemistry.
So you actually wear a lot of hats. Is one of them origin of life chemist?
My PhD is in chemistry, but I don't do origin of life chemistry.
But you're interested in origin of life.
Yes, absolutely.
So some of your best friends are origin of life chemists.
Just make sure that you have good chemist friends if you're interested in origin of life.
Yeah.
That's 100% requirement. It should be mandatory.
Okay, so chemistry. So what else about this machinery that we need to know chemically?
Well, chemically, I think that's it. You have enzymes, you have proteins. The enzymes are doing their thing. They know how to chew energy using ATP or GTP. They know what to do in their own way. They do their enzymatic thing. So it's not just the ribosome that is at the heart of the translation, but there are a lot of different proteins. You're looking at about 100 different components that compose this machinery.
Well, let me ask maybe it's a ridiculous question, but did the chemistry make this machine, or did the machine use chemistry to achieve a purpose? So, like, I guess there's a lot of different chemical possibilities on Earth. Is this translation machinery just like picking and choosing different chemical reactions that it can use to achieve a purpose? Or did the chemistry basically there's like a momentum, like a constraint to the thing that can only build a certain kind of machinery? That's basically is chemistry fundamental, or is it just emergent? Like, how important is chemistry to this whole process?
You cannot have life without chemistry. You cannot have any cellular process without chemistry. What makes life interesting is that even if the chemistry is imperfect, even if there are accidents along the way, if something binds to another chemical in a way it shouldn't, there is resilience within the system that it can maybe not necessarily repair itself, but it moves on. However imperfect, mistakes can be handled.
That's where the biology comes in.
That's where the biology comes in. But in terms of chemistry, you absolutely cannot have a translation machinery without chemistry. And so you're, as I said, there are four main steps. These are the core steps that are conserved in all translation machinery. And I should say, all life has this machine, right? Every cell, everything.
On Earth.
On Earth.
Yeah.
Yes.
When you think of this machine, do you think very specifically about the kind of machinery that we're talking about, or do you think more philosophically, a machine that converts information into function?
I cannot separate the two. I think what makes this machinery fascinating is that those 5 components that I listed they coexist. So, for instance, if we let's just talking about the chemistry part, we know the certain rate constant all these proteins that operate in this machinery needs to harbor in order to get the mechanism going, right? If you are bringing the information to the translation machinery and you are the initiator of this computation system, you need to have you can only afford a certain range of mistakes. If you're too fast, then the next message cannot be delivered fast. If you're too slow, then you may stall the process. So there is definitely a chemistry constant going on within the machinery. Again, it's not perfect, far from it, but they all have their own margin of error that they can tolerate versus they cannot. Otherwise, they collapse. The system collapses.
So it's like a jazz ensemble, the notes of the chemistry, but you can be.
I love that you said jazz. It's definitely true. It's a party, and it's like everybody's invited, and they need to operate together, right? And they what's really cool about it, I think, there are many things that are very interesting about this thing. But if you remove it from the cell and put it in a cell-free environment, it works just fine, right? So you can get cell-free translation systems. Put this translation in a test tube, and it is doing its thing. It doesn't need the rest of the cell to translate information. Of course, you need to feed the information, at least so far. But because we are evolving a translation, maybe not so far, evolving a translation in the lab, or the machinery that can process information as it generates it. We have not done that yet.
It's a pretty complicated machinery, so it's hard for those origin of life chemists to find a pot that generates.
Because it's far more than chemistry. You need biology, obviously. You need biochemistry. You need to think as in network systems folk. You need to think about computation. You need to think about information. And that is not happening yet, except we are trying to bring this perspective. But the more you understand how information systems work, you cannot, once you see it, you cannot unsee it. It's one of those things.
So, but you can still rip it out and the chemistry happens.
Yes. And chemistry can happen even if you strip some of the parts out. You can get very minimal level of information processing that does not look anything like the translation that cells relies on, but chemists showed from linear. You can generate information that arrives to a processing center in the form of a linear polymer. But the informatic part of this system that I think sets it apart from computation and from metabolism comes in if you think about the information itself, right? So we have 4 nucleotide letters that compose DNA, and they are processed in the translation in triplets. So you have in triplet codon fragments. So you have 4 times 4 times 4. So you have 64 possible states that can be encoded by 4 letters in 3 positions. All right, so
It's so amazing.
yeah,
It's so amazing.
there's only one code that says start. That there's only one, and then there's 2, if not 3, that says stop. So that's what you work with. But you can have 64 possible states, but life only uses 20 amino acids. So life uses 64 possible states minus 4 of the starts and stops to code for 20 amino acids in different combinations. That is really amazing. If you think about there are 500 different amino acids life can choose, right? It narrowed it down to 20. We don't know why. A lot of people think about this genetic code is quite fascinating.
So far, right?
I mean, it didn't do it for 4 billion years. I don't know. We may wait for another 4 billion years, but
But you didn't have those amino acids in the very beginning, right? Like
we don't know. So we would be fooling ourselves if we said we know exactly how many amino acids existed early on. But there's no reason to think that it wasn't the same.
similar.
Yeah, we don't have a good reason. But because roughly 20 out of 60 states are used, you're using 1/3 of your possible states in your information system. So this may seem like a waste, but informatically it's important because it's abundant and it is redundant, right?
Yeah.
So this code degeneracy, you see this that's implemented by this translation machinery inside the cell. So it means you can make errors, right? You can make errors, but the message will still get through. You can speak missing some letters to the information can miss some parts, but the message will still get through. So that 2/3 of the not used states gives you that robustness and resilience within the system.
So at the informatic level, there's room for error. There's probably room for error in all 5 categories that we're talking about. There's probably room for error in the computation. There's probably room for error in the physics.
Yes, exactly.
Everywhere there's room
Yeah,
for error.
because this informatic capacity is made possible together with the other components, and not only that, but also the product yields a functional, in this case, enzyme or protein, right? So that's really amazing to me.
It is. I mean, in my head, just so you know, because I'm a computer science AI person, the parallels between even like language models that encode language, or now they're able to encode basically any kind of thing, including images and actions, all in this kind of way. The parallel in terms of informatic and computation is just incredible.
Actually, I have a image. Maybe I can send you.
Can we pull it up now?
If you just do genetic codon charts, we can pull that up. Yeah, it's a very standard table. So I can explain why this is so amazing. So you're looking at this is life's alphabet, right? And so I also want to make a very quick link now to your first question, the tree of life. When we try to understand ancient languages, right, or the cultures of the cultures that use these extinct languages, we start with the modern languages, right? So we look at Indo-European languages and try to understand certain words and make trees to understand. This is what Slavic word is for snow, something like snake.
Now we jump to languages that humans spoke.
Human
history.
Exactly. So we make trees to understand what is the original ancestor, what did they use to say snow. And if you have a lot of cultures who use the word snow, you can imagine that it was snowy. That's why they needed that word. It's the same thing for biology, right? If they have some if we understand some function about the enzyme, we can understand the environment that they lived in. It's similar in that